I want to welcome you all to Musleh Mode Day today. Before we get started, I would like to invite to the podium three gentlemen to accompany me. Imam Taha Sahib, Imam Rizwan Khan Sahib, and Mr. Hamid Khan Sahib. If you would all please approach the dais and take your seats, please. We will begin our program this morning with a tilawat and translation by Ahmad Khan Sahib.
We're studying Surah Al-Jummah, verses 1 to 2. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. Translation: In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful. Whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth glorifies Allah, the Sovereign, the Holy, the Mighty, the Wise. He it is who has raised among the unlettered people a messenger from among themselves, who recites unto them his signs, and purifies them, and teaches them the book and wisdom, although they had been before in manifest misguidance. And among others, from among them who have not yet joined them. He is the Mighty, the Wise.
Jazakallah Ahmad. We will now have a nazm by Fawzan Khan Sahib.
निगाहों ने तेरी मुझ पर किया ऐसा फसूं साकी कि दिल में जोश वहशत है तो सर में है जुनून साकी कि दिल में जोश वहशत है तो सर में है जुनून साकी जीऊं तो तेरी खुशनूदी की खातिर ही जीऊं साकी जीऊं तो तेरी खुशनूदी की खातिर ही जीऊं साकी मरूं तो तेरे दरवाजे के आगे ही मरूं साकी मरूं तो तेरे दरवाजे के आगे ही मरूं साकी पिलाए तू अगर मुझको मैं इतनी पीऊं साकी रहूं ताहश्र कदमों पर तेरे मैं सर निगूं साकी रहूं ताहश्र कदमों पर तेरे मैं सर निगूं साकी तेरी दुनिया में फरजाने बहुत से पाए जाते हैं मुझे तू बख्श दे अपनी मोहब्बत का जुनून साकी मुझे तू बख्श दे अपनी मोहब्बत का जुनून साकी सिवा एक तेरे मैं खाने के सब मैं खाने खाली पिलाए गर तू मुझको तो फिर मैं क्या करूं साकी पिलाए गर न तू मुझको तो फिर मैं क्या करूं साकी तुझे मालूम है जो कुछ मेरे दिल की तमन्ना है मेरा हर जर्रा गोया है जुबान से क्या कहूँ साकी मेरा हर जर्रा गोया है, जुबान से क्या कहूँ साकी। वो क्या सूरत है जिससे मैं निगाहे लुत्फ को पाऊं, छूं दामन को तेरे या तेरे, पाऊं पढ़ूं साकी। छूं दामन को तेरे या तेरे, पाऊं पढ़ूं साकी। मुझे कैदे मोहब्बत लाख आजादी से अच्छी है, कुछ ऐसा कर के पाबंदे सलासल ही रहूं साकी। कुछ ऐसा कर के पाबंदे सलासल ही रहूं साकी। तेरे दर की गदाई से बड़ा है कौन सा दर्जा, मुझे गर बादशाहत भी मिले तो मैं ना लूं साकी। मुझे गर बादशाहत भी मिले तो मैं ना लूं साकी। फिदा होते हैं परवाने अगर शम्मे मुनव्वर पर, फिदा होते हैं परवाने अगर शम्मे मुनव्वर पर। तो तेरे रूए रोशन पर न मैं क्यों जान दूं साकी। तो तेरे रूए रोशन पर न मैं क्यों जान दूं साकी। निगाहों ने तेरी मुझ पर किया ऐसा फसूं साकी कि दिल में जोश वहशत है तो सर में है जुनून साकी। This is a poem of Hazrat Musleh that I recited. The translation is as follows. Your gaze has had such an enchanting effect on me. My heart brims with madness while my conscience is restless. If I live for your sake. If I die, I choose to die on your doorstep. If you offer me a drink, I will drink endlessly. I remain at your feet in prostration till the judgment day. Your world is populated with many admirers. Grant me the desire of your love as well. Except your tavern, all other taverns are empty. Unless you grant me a drink yourself, what am I to do? You are intimately aware of the desires of my heart. Every fiber of my being is a proclamation. What need is there for me to speak? What image is there from which I can garner an affectionate gaze? Should I place my head upon your heart, or should I prostrate upon your feet? I prefer the prison of love over 1,000 freedoms. Find some means for me to remain your captive. What greater status is there than to be a beggar upon your doorstep? Even if kingship be granted to me, I would not accept. If moths eagerly lay sacrifice upon a burning flame, so why should I not give up my life upon your radiant light?
Jazakallah Fawzan Sahib for a very lovely nazam. I'd like to now call upon Mr. Sadat Malik, who will be along with a team of Khadim, Tifl and Nasrat, giving a group presentation about the prophecy of Muslim.
Muslim prophecy is going to be presented by Mirza Sharif Ahmad Sahib and Shoaib Ahmad Malik Sahib. This prophecy was published by Hazrat Masih Maud Salam on February 20th, 1886. At this point, I will request Naeem Sahib to play the PowerPoint slide, please.
मौत ज़हूर के बारे में अजीम शान इलाही बशारत। सो तुझे बशारत हो कि एक वजीह और पाक लड़का तुझे दिया जाएगा, एक ज़की गुलाम तुझे मिलेगा। वो लड़का तेरे ही तुख्म से तेरी ही ज़ुर्रियत व नस्ल होगा। खूबसूरत पाक लड़का तुम्हारा मेहमान आता है, उसका नाम अनवाई और बशीर भी है। उसको मुक़द्दस रूह दी गई है और वो रिज़्क़ से पाक है। वो नूरुल्लाह है। मुबारक वो जो आसमान से आता है, उसके साथ फजल है जो उसके आने के साथ आएगा। वो साहिब शको और अज़मत और दौलत होगा।
Translation: Rejoice, therefore, that a handsome and pure boy will be bestowed on you. You will receive an unblemished youth who will be of your seed and will be of your progeny. A handsome and pure boy is coming as your guest. His name is Emmanuel, and also Bashir. He has been invested with the spirit of holiness, and he is free from all impurity. He is the light of Allah. Blessed is he who comes from heaven. He will be accompanied by grace, which shall arrive with him. He will be characterized with grandeur, greatness, and wealth.
मुस्लिम मौत ज़हूर के बाद वो दुनिया में आएगा और अपने मसीही नफ्स और रूहुल हक की बरकत से बहुतों को बीमारियों से साफ करेगा। वो कलमतुल्लाह है, क्योंकि खुदा की रहमत व गयूरी ने उसे कलमा तमजीद से भेजा है। वो सख्त ज़हीन व फहीम होगा और दिल का हलीम और उलूम ज़ाहिरी व बातिनी से पुर किया जाएगा। और वो दीन को चाक करने वाला होगा। दो शम्बा है, मुबारक दो शम्बा, फर्जंद दिलबंद, गरामी अर्जुमंद, मज़हरुल अव्वल वल आखिर, मज़हरुल हक़ वल उलाय, कअन्नल्लाह नज़ला मिनस समाए।
He will come into the world and will heal many of their disorders through his messianic qualities, through the blessings of the Spirit of holiness. He is the word of Allah, for Allah's mercy and honor have equipped him with the word of majesty. He will be extremely intelligent and perceptive, and will be meek of heart, and will be filled with secular and spiritual knowledge. He will convert 3 into 4. It is Monday, a blessed Monday. Sun, the light of the heart, high-ranking noble, a manifestation of the first and the last, a manifestation of the true and the high, as if Allah has descended from heaven.
वो दुनिया में आएगा और अपने मसीही नफ्स और रूहुल हक की बरकत से बहुतों को बीमारियों से साफ करेगा। वो कलमतुल्लाह है, क्योंकि खुदा की रहमत व गयूरी ने उसे कलमा तमजीद से भेजा है। वो सख्त ज़हीन व फहीम होगा और दिल का हलीम और उलूम ज़ाहिरी व बातिनी से पुर किया जाएगा। और वो दीन को चाह करने वाला होगा। दो शम्बा है, मुबारक तो शम्बा, फर्जंद दिलबंद, गरामी अर्जुमन, मज़हरुल अव्वल वल आखिर, मज़हरुल हक़ वल उलाए, कअन्नल्लाह नज़ला मिनस समाए।
Translation. His advent will be greatly blessed and will be a source of manifestation of divine majesty. Behold, a light comes from anointed by God with perfume of his pleasure. We shall pour our spirit onto him, and he will be sheltered under the shadow of God. He will grow rapidly in stature and will be the means of procuring the release of those held in bondage. His fame will spread to the ends of the earth, and peoples will be blessed through him. He will then be raised to a spiritual station in heaven. This is a matter decreed.
Jazakallah Malik Sahib, to you and your team. And also Jazakallah for getting us back on schedule. At this point, I would like to now call upon Imam Rizwan Khan Sahib for a talk about Muslim mode as a family man.
لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. When we look at those who are very holy people, prophets of God, khulafa, and just saintly people in general, sometimes there is a misconception that arises in our minds, perhaps from unfamiliarity with those people who are truly on the heights of spirituality, because perhaps there is an exaggeration of what that status may be as far as our perception of it. But it happens where sometimes it is imagined that those people who are on the highest stages of spirituality are very dry people, or perhaps they do not share in the types of happiness and the emotions that we feel as those who are otherwise worldly people. And so sometimes a greater seriousness and dryness is attributed to them, which isn't actually the case. This is something that is described by Hazrat Ghulam Rasul Rajiti anhu in Hayat Qudsi as well, where he says that after he first did bayat with the promised Messiah, he had this perception in his mind that those who are true Sufis and really waliullah, awliyaullah, they never really laugh. They're always serious and somber in their mood. And one day when he saw the promised Messiah laughing, when he was listening to something, it was a joke or something like that, then it seemed strange to him. Later that night, Allah Almighty revealed to him the verse of the Holy Quran, فَتَبَسَّمَ زَاهِكًا, which was that Hazrat Sulaiman smiled laughing. And so he understood his mistake. Now this is a mistake that many times we have not everyone, but it is something that at least I know as a misconception I've had. And this is a way of looking at sometimes the marriages and the family life of our khulafa and the prophets of God as well. It may seem that simply because someone is a prophet of God or a khalifa, perhaps he is very serious at home, perhaps it is a type of environment that we just imagine extending ourselves into if someone is on the heights of righteousness. But one thing that I myself was surprised to learn was how much love there was in the marriages of Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu, and how truly emotional and meaningful all of his family relationships were. And this is a source of insight on how we can improve our relationships as well. The khulafa and their relationships with their families are not something that are just to be placed at a distance or on a pedestal, nor is it something that is beyond us. Allah Almighty says in the Holy Quran that there's a reason why He sent a human being as a prophet. Because if He had sent an angel, then that person would not have been as an example for us. But the humanity of a prophet is actually what makes that individual a true guide for us. So this is also what we see with Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu. And one thing that comes up again and again in his character is something unique about the way in which he expressed his love. Throughout the teachings of Islam, we see again and again that one should treat their families well, that one should treat their wives well, that spouses should have love and affection between one another. And we find examples of this in the hadith and in the history of Hazrat Masih Maud as well. But one thing unique about Hazrat Musleh Maud is that I don't think anyone has been so uninhibited in expressing and writing about and speaking about the love and the affection that he had for his wives. And so, looking into that insight is something that can open a new door of understanding for us as well. Many times, when people look at the idea of an arranged marriage, because of the effects of our influence of our society, we look at it as a very somber affair, perhaps something that two people have to fulfill as a responsibility, not something that can be as happy and as enchanted and as filled with infatuation as a love marriage is, as this society promotes. But the reality is that the marriages of Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu, which we see from repeated examples, were filled with more love and infatuation than the love of anyone else. And not only that, but despite the fact that he had more than one wife, but it seems that he had more individual love between each of his wives than perhaps anyone has, even with their singular and monogamous marriage. Now, there are many examples of this that we see. One is that when Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu, his marriage was arranged with Hazrat Sara Begum radiallahu anha, rahmatullah alayha. Then once the formalities were fulfilled and just before the actual rukhsatana took place, he had written her a letter in which he had written her name in a certain way. And this was a way in which he expressed some affection to her even before their marriage was, they came together and started living together. He had sort of put a message in that letter for her to interpret. And then she had also responded with a bit of affection as well. She writes in her letter back to Hazrat Musleh Maud that आपके खत में अपने नाम को मुशद्दद देखकर पहले मुताज्जिब हुई, लिफाफा के ऊपर की इबारत में उसके मफ़हूम को समझने की तरफ तवज्जो दिलाई, क्योंकि मैं उससे नावाकिफ थी। उर्दू फारसी लोगों में देखा, लेकिन कहीं पता न चला। आखिर मुंतहीउल अदब में देखा, उसमें उसके माने लिखे थे, जन शादमान कुन। इस इंकिशाफ हकीकत से मुझे बेखद खुशी हुई। दुआ है कि अल्लाह ताला फिल वाक़ई इसमें बामुसम्मा बनाए। मेरी तबीयत निस्बतन अच्छी है, कामिल सेहत के लिए दुआ की ज़रूरत है। राकिमा आपकी सारा। Now in this letter, Hazrat Sara rahmatullah alayha writes to her husband that he had addressed her as Sara Begum, but he had placed a shadda on the re in her name. And in that there was a message that she saw. And when she looked it up in the dictionary, she finally found what the meaning of it was. It meant a woman who is happy. And so she said when she realized this message that Hazrat Musleh Maud had given her, she said that she was extremely happy. And she said that please pray that this hope that you have towards me is actually fulfilled. And then also something else nice that we see in this letter is that she refers to herself as Aapki Sara, that you are Sara. And this is something that Hazrat Musleh Maud radiallahu anhu, a type of language that he would use to express his affection as well. So these are just small things that show that even before marriage took place, when there is a great deal of shyness often among couples ordinarily, but still Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu did not hesitate to express affection and to show even before she had moved with him that the lovingness that he had as a husband. This was something that he also passed on to his children as well. In Hayat-e-Nasir, there's a letter of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sadis that he wrote to his wife, and in the end he also addressed himself in a way that showed affection to his wife, where he wrote that Hamesha Tumhara Nasir, that always your Nasir. So this is just a small example of how the Khulafa have taught us that in small expressions of affection and putting thought into these little gifts that we can give to one another, we can increase the love and the tenderness in a relationship. Then Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu, writing about the origins of the newspaper Al-Fazl, speaks about how his wife Hazrat Nasir radiallahu anha gave a huge donation that enabled him to be able to actually start that newspaper. She had sold two of her pieces of valuable jewelry that had not just monetary value, but it had great sentimental value as well. This sacrifice that she made is something that he always remembered, and he appreciates it in the following words. He writes that Al-Fazl apne saath meri bebasi ki halat aur meri biwi ki qurbani ko taza rakhega aur mere liye to iska har ek parcha गू न गू कैफियत का पैदा करने वाला होता है। बारहा वो मुझे जमात की वो हालत याद दिलाता है जिसके लिए अखबार की ज़रूरत थी। बारहा वो मुझे अपनी बीवी की वो कुर्बानी याद दिलाता है जिसका मुस्तहिक ना मैं अपने पहले सलूक के सबब से था, ना बाद के सलूक ने मुझे उसका मुस्तहिक साबित किया। वो बीवी जिनको मैंने उस वक्त तक एक सोने की अंगूठी भी शायद बनाकर ना दी थी, और जिनको बाद में इस वक्त तक मैंने सिर्फ एक अंगूठी बनवा कर दी है, उनकी ये कुर्बानी मेरे दिल पर नक्श है। अगर उनकी और कुर्बानियाँ और हमदर्दियाँ और अपनी सख्तियाँ और तेज़ियाँ मैं नज़रअंदाज भी कर दूँ, तो उनका ये सलूक मुझे शर्मिंदा करने के लिए काफ़ी है। इस हुस्न सलूक ने ना सिर्फ मुझे हाथ दिए जिनसे मैं दीन की खिदमत करने के काबिल हुआ और मेरे लिए ज़िंदगी का एक नया वर्क उलट दिया, बल्कि सारी जमात की ज़िंदगी के लिए भी एक बहुत बड़ा सबब पैदा कर दिया। Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu explains that each time when he sees a new issue of Al-Fazl, it reminds him of the condition that the Jamaat was in at the time that it was published, how delicate the condition of the Jamaat was. But it also reminds him of the sacrifice of his wife, which she made for his sake so that he could start this newspaper. And he expresses his humility and his gratitude towards his wife, which also gives us a lesson as well. To express one's affection to one's wife, and also one's humility in admitting their own shortcomings is something that does not come easily to everyone. And not only to say it in words, but to write it down. And not just write it down, but to have it published as well. This is something that requires a great deal of open-heartedness, but it also requires a great deal of intimacy as well. And so, in this way, Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu not only felt a great deal of gratitude, and we see such humility within him as well, that despite the fact that he was an ideal husband and his wives continuously appreciated the fact that there was no husband better than him, but he considered himself to be the lowest of the low, and he did not consider himself deserving of any credit. Then Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu writes about his relationship with another one of his wives, that about Hazrat Maryam rahmatullah alayha, that मगर वो इस वहम में रहती थी कि मुझसे मोहब्बत कम की जाती है, लेकिन आखिरी बीमारी में जो दो औरतें बारी बारी इनकी सोबत में रहीं, उन्होंने मुझे अलग अलग सुनाया है कि उन्होंने अपनी गलती का इतराफ़ किया। पहली ने सुनाया कि उन्होंने इस अमर का इजहार किया कि मेरा ख्याल था कि हज़रत साहिब को मुझसे मोहब्बत नहीं, मगर ये गलत है। मेरी बीमारी में जो उन्होंने खिदमत की है, इससे मुझे मालूम हो गया है कि इनको मुझसे बहुत मोहब्बत है। अगर मैं ज़िंदा रही तो मैं इनके पाँव धोकर पीऊँगी। और दूसरी ने सुनाया कि मुझसे उन्होंने कहा कि अब मुझे तसल्ली हो गई है कि मुझसे इनको बहुत मोहब्बत है, अगर मैं जिंदा रही तो मैं अपनी उम्र इनकी खिदमत में खर्च कर दूंगी। मगर हज़रत मुस्लिम मौद फरमाते हैं, मगर किस्मत का फेर देखो कि दोनों ने इनकी वफ़ात के बाद ये बात मुझसे बयान की। अगर वो उनकी ज़िंदगी में मुझसे ये बात कहती तो मेरे लिए कितनी खुशी का मौजब होता। मैं इनके पास जाता और हाथ में हाथ लेकर कहता कि मरियम तुम फिक्र ना करो, तुमको ना खिदमत की ज़रूरत है और ना पाउंड होने की। तुम्हारे दिल में इस ख्याल के आने से ही मुझे मेरी सारी मोहब्बत का बदला मिल गया है। शायद इससे उन्हें भी तसल्ली होती और मेरा दिल भी खुश हो जाता। अगर एक मिनट के लिए भी हम एक दूसरे के सामने इस तरह खड़े हो जाते कि हम एक दूसरे को समझ रहे होते तो ये लम्हा हम दोनों के लिए कैसा खुशकुन होता। Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizqillah Anhu writes that when his wife Hazrat Maryam Rahmatullah Alayha was in her final illness, then although she had expressed doubts before because she had always been desirous of being the object of the exceptional love of Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizqillah Anhu, she had sometimes expressed her doubt about his love for her. But she said that in her final illness to a couple of the attendants who were with her, that now I am certain that Hazrat Muslim Maud truly loves me because of the way in which he has sacrificed during this illness of mine. And she said that if I survive this illness and if I continue to live, then I will spend the rest of my life in service of Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizqillah Anhu. But Huzur says that if I had known that she had said this and if this had been conveyed to me, then I would have told her, I would have taken her hand and I would have said to her that there is no need to serve me at all, but the fact that you have expressed your love in this way is sufficient for me, and that is all the recompense I need for the love that I have given you. And so there also we see a beautiful example of how much love and affection there was between Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizqillah Anhu and his wife Hazrat Maryam. Then Hazrat Muslim Maud Rizqillah Anhu narrates another event, which was after the demise of his second wife, Hazrat Amatul Hayy Rizqillah Anha, who was the daughter of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal Rizqillah Anhu. At that time, Hazrat Muslim Maud faced a great difficulty in that he did not know who he could entrust her children to after she had passed away. And so this thought was in his mind. And so he asked Hazrat Maryam Rahmatullah Alayha, his other wife, if she would take care of this responsibility. Huzur writes that मैंने इनसे उस वक्त वादा किया, that after Hazrat Maryam had taken on this responsibility willingly, and after she had said that I will love these children more than my own children, he said to her that मैंने इनसे उस वक्त वादा किया कि मरियम तुम इन बेमाँ के बच्चों को पालो और मैं तुमसे वादा करता हूँ कि मैं तुमसे बहुत मोहब्बत करूँगा। और मैंने खुदा ताला से रो रो कर दुआ की कि अल्लाह ताला इनकी मोहब्बत मेरे दिल में पैदा कर दे, और उसने मेरी दुआ सुन ली। मैंने उस दिन से इनसे मोहब्बत करनी शुरू कर दी। इनकी तरफ से सब इनके बाज दिल से निकल गया और वो मेरे दिल पर मुसल्लत हो गई। इनकी वही शक्ल जो मेरी आंखों में चुभती थी अब मुझे सारी दुनिया में हसीन तरीन नजर आने लगी, और इनका लाओ बालीपन जिस पर मैं बुरा मनाया करता था अब मुझे इनका पैदाइशी हक मालूम देने लगा. In this narration, we see that as Hazrat Muslim Maud has described how he prayed to be granted love for his wife Hazrat Maryam. And this shows us something that is significant about marriage as well, which is that simply because two people are married does not mean that the love can be equal between all of spouses. Even this has been expressed by the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Allah Ta'ala commanded that all the physical and all the sort of worldly arrangements should be made perfectly equal between all of the spouses of someone who has more than one wife. But it is not possible for a person to love all of his wives equally. Some he will naturally be have more affinity with, and others he may not. And so that is something outside of a person's control. It was even outside of the control of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And this also we see with Hazrat Muslim Maud. But we see that he worked towards the love in his marriage, and he prayed for it. And as a result of it, that love was generated on such a level that she became his most beloved wife afterwards. Then also we see another lesson as well, which has to do with an aspect of materialism that is found in many people that we can learn from. And that is that many times when men look for a spouse, they look primarily to the beauty of a woman. But as Hazrat Muslim Maud has described here, that his wife, although she was not particularly attractive to him before, but because of this beauty that he saw in her character, and so that forced him to just completely change his perspective in a way. So this also demonstrates a lesson for us, two lessons for us. One is that spirituality is of greatest importance, and that love in a marriage is something that we have to work for and pray for. Whether it is a person who is not yet married or a person who is already married, something that we should pray for is that Allah Almighty grant us love and more love for our spouse. And another thing that we learn is that physical appearance is something that is a type of materialism if a person makes it their primary purpose. In fact, Hazrat Muslim Maud describes elsewhere about his wife Hazrat Amatul Hayy that मैं शक्लों का परस्तार नहीं हूँ, मरहूमा की शक्ल जिस्मानी लिहाज से कोई अच्छी शक्ल ना थी, दूसरी बीवियों की शक्ल उनसे बहुत अच्छी थी, लेकिन उनके अंदर एक ऐसा ईमान था हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम पर, एक ऐसा यकीन था इस्लाम की सदाकत पर जो ईमान और यकीन बहुत कम औरतों में पाया जाता है. Then Huzur says that उनकी दीन से मोहब्बत, उनकी हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम से मोहब्बत, उनकी वो हालत ईमान जो दीन के दूसरे शोबों के साथ थी, मेरे एहसास के कल्ब को मुतासिर किए बगैर ना रह सकती थी. Hazrat Muslim Maud radiallahu anhu describes about his wife Hazrat Amatul Hayy that although in physical appearance she was not such that she was exceptional, but still because of her spiritual qualities, that left a deep and lasting impression on him. And that impression was so much that he considered this marriage to be the most successful of all his marriages. In fact, elsewhere he writes that Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam ने फरमाया है कि अल अरवाहु जुनूदुन मुजन्नदतुन, कि रूहें एक दूसरे से वाबस्ता और पैवस्ता होती हैं, यानी बाज़ का बाज़ से ताल्लुक़ होता है. और मैं समझता हूँ कि मेरी रूह को अमतुल हई की रूह से एक पैवस्तगी हासिल थी. मुझे हमेशा हैरत होती है और इसका जिक्र कभी कभी मैं मरहूमा से भी किया करता था कि जब शादी की तो उन पर एहसान समझ कर की थी कि हज़रत खलीफतुल मसीह अल-अव्वल की इस ख्वाहिश को पूरा करूँ कि मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम के ख़ानदान से आपके ख़ानदान का खूनी रिश्ता कायम हो जाए. लेकिन मैं नहीं जानता था ये मेरी नेक नीयती और अपने उस्ताद और आका की ख्वाहिश को पूरा करने की आरज़ू ऐसे आला दर्जे के फल लाएगी और मेरे लिए इससे ऐसे राहत के सामान पैदा होंगे. मुझे बहुत सी शादियाँ के तजर्बे हैं, मैंने खुद भी कई शादियाँ की हैं और बहैसियत एक जमात का इमाम होने के हज़ारों शादियों से ताल्लुक़ है और हज़ारों वाक़यात मुझ तक पहुँचते रहते हैं, मगर मैंने उम्र भर कोई ऐसी कामयाब और खुश करने वाली शादी नहीं देखी जैसी मेरी ये शादी थी. Huzur quotes a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wherein he said that souls are such that they are made in pairs, that they are made with natural affinity to one another. And Huzur says that my soul had a natural affinity with that of Hazrat Amatul Hayy radiyallahu anha. And he says that I have seen and witnessed many marriages in my life, but I never saw a marriage which was as successful as this marriage of mine. This was his marriage with Hazrat Amatul Hayy radiyallahu anha. And this is the love that existed between them as an example for all others who are either seeking to get married or are looking to find a marriageable partner for their children. Hazrat Muslim Maud radiyallahu anhu has elsewhere described that parents and people themselves should pray that Allah Almighty grant them their soulmate, that Allah Almighty grant them that piece of that individual who is sort of meant for them and who has a natural affinity to them. Then after this, Hazrat Muslim Maud radiyallahu anhu writes elsewhere about his last conversation with his wife Hazrat Maryam rahmatullah alayha, that उस वक्त मेरा दिल चाहता था कि अभी चूंकि ज़ुबान और कान काम करते हैं मैं इनसे कुछ मोहब्बत की बातें कर लूँ, मगर मैंने फ़ैसला किया कि अब ये इस जहां की रूह नहीं उस जहां की है, अब हमारा ताल्लुक़ इससे ख़त्म है, अब सिर्फ अपने रब से उसका वास्ता है. इस वास्ता में खलल डालना इसके तक़द्दुस में खलल डालना है. और मैंने चाहा कि उन्हें भी आखिरी वक्त की तरफ तवज्जो दिलाऊं ताकि वो ज़िक्र इलाही में मशगूल हो जाएं, मगर साफ तौर पर कहने से भी डरता था कि उनका कमज़ोर दिल कहीं ज़िक्र इलाही का मौका पाने से पहले ही बैठ ना जाए। आखिर सोचकर मैंने उनसे इस तरह कहा कि मरियम, मरना तो हर एक ने है, देखो अगर मैं पहले मर जाऊं तो मैं अल्लाह ताला से दरख्वास्त करूंगा कि वो कभी कभी मुझको तुम्हारी मुलाकात के लिए इजाज़त दिया करे, और अगर तुम पहले फौत हो गई तो फिर तुम अल्लाह ताला से दरख्वास्त करना कि वो तुम्हारी रूह को कभी कभी मुझसे मिलने की इजाज़त दे दिया करे। और मरियम, इस सूरत में तुम मेरा हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम और हज़रत मसीह मौऊद अलैहिस्सलाम से सलाम कहना। Here Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu writes that when his wife Hazrat Maryam was passing away in her final illness, and he saw that her life was coming to an end, then he said to her, he wanted to convey and express his personal love for her, but then he thought that this relationship of a husband and wife is now coming to an end, and now she is leaving this world and her connection is now with the world of the hereafter. And so he said to her that we all have to die one day or another. And so why don't we do this, that if I die first, then I will ask Allah Almighty that let me meet with you even in the hereafter on a spiritual level. And if you pass away, then you ask Allah Almighty that Allah Almighty allow you to meet with me from time to time. And if He allows you to meet with me, in that way I can convey my salam to the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the promised Messiah Alayhi Salatu Wassalam. Now this also is just another glimpse into the beautiful and deep love and affection that existed between Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu and his wives. And many times couples, they have conversations about how they will spend their future, about the hereafter, and how deep their love is. But here Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu is asking her to pray and remember Allah Almighty, and then hoping that in the hereafter even, that they will be able to meet with one another. So this also is an expression of that deep love and affection. These are just a few examples of Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu's expressions of affection that he wrote about his wives. And what this shows us is a deep lesson that sometimes is overlooked. And that lesson is that those who are holy people are not dry and empty of the emotions that the rest of us experience. And being righteous and being one who conforms to the commandments of Allah Ta'ala does not make one bereft of the joys and the pleasures of life, but rather it actually opens the doors of the correctly channeled pleasures that make one able to experience the greatest loves and the greatest pleasures in life. And so this is a lesson for us as well, that just as Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu was extremely affectionate towards his wives, despite the fact that on each time that one of his wives passed away, 3 of his wives passed away, he writes about how deeply heartbroken he was and how difficult it was for him to get married again in that condition, and how he was in no condition to get married more than once. But still, out of his sense of responsibility for the Jamaat, he got married again anyway for the sake of the tarbiyat of the lajna of the Jamaat. But despite that responsibility, despite his busy schedule, and despite the fact that he himself described his own condition of heart as being one that was disinclined to more than one marriage, but still he was able to fulfill that responsibility in such a beautiful way. And he was able to have such a deep relationship of affection with his spouses. And so, in these different examples, we can see that in the examples of the Khulafa, part of our responsibility is also to be affectionate, to be expressive, to be uninhibited, and to go and not to allow any insecurity or feeling of a veil between our spouses get in the way of expressing our affection, and also of feeling and improving upon that deep love that we have in that relationship. So this example of Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu is an excellent way by means of which we can improve the quality of our marriages as well. By understanding the way in which Hazrat Musleh Maud Radhiyallahu anhu conducted himself in his marriages, we can make a very deep and intimate change within our own marriages to try and be exemplary, not only in fulfilling our responsibilities to Allah Almighty, but also fulfilling our emotional responsibilities to our spouses. May Allah Almighty help us to do so.
I'd like to now call upon Mr. Jalil Akbar Saab
Assalamualaikum. Name Sab, if you could connect the monitors on the first floor. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Amma ba'du fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So I don't have a written speech prepared for you because I know what I want to say. And there's not much for me to say. It's rather, I am blessed with having some collection of some historical material that I can share with the Jamaat so that we can go back in time and imagine and relive the experiences with Hazrat Musleh Maud. So at first I was going to play some pictures or show some pictures, but I've decided that I'm just going to go straight to the videos. And let's go to 1924 when Hazrat Musleh Maud made his first trip to London. This was the era of silent movies. So he was filmed in England in the silent movie era. And perhaps because of the wireless connection, the playback of the movie is not in real time. It's being wirelessly transmitted to the basement downstairs, so we get these frames. But this is Hazrat Musleh Maud visiting a memorial to the fallen comrades of the Indian soldiers who fought in World War I. And this is a movie of Hazrat Musleh Maud leading namaz. Now here, we're fast forwarding now to 1940, early 1940s.
अब शायद मेरे इस निकालने को भी कई लोग जो बहुत ज्यादा अपने आप को स्वतंत्र समझते हैं, उन्होंने कहा हुआ है बहुत बुरी बात है बाहर निकालने से निकालिए तो कई मोहब्बत वाले बच्चे होंगे जिन्होंने कपड़ों से मंदिर थे। तो रसुल्ला ने आगे समाया ये मेरे राज्य की तरफ से ताजा ताजा चीज लाई थी मेरे से। तो मोहम्मद ने ना पता नहीं हुआ मैंने तो खुदा की नहीं अपनी और मैंने अपनी जबानी की गाली तो मोहम्मद रसूलुल्लाह की जबान से मुताबिक अपनी जबान हुआ। इसलिए ना मैंने जबान निकाली ना उन्होंने कब्र दी। उन्होंने मेरे में बेला ही दी, मैंने मोहम्मद की जबान। मकाम मोहब्बत में बयान फरमाता है कि तू क्या अपने आप को हलाक कर लेगा इसलिए तो मेरे बच्चे को तुरंत मोहम्मद नहीं बन ये इस तरह मोहब्बत तू मेरे बच्चे की रखता है तो ये ख्याल करके जो मुझसे दूर है और मेरे लिए तकलीफ तो मौजूद है, मेरे लिए नाखुशी तो मौजूद है, तो आप मारा चला जाएगा। तो पहले से तू मेरे आयत में है कि जब तू मेरे लिए इस तरह मारा जा रहा है तो मैं मेरे लिए कर सकता हूँ।
here in this sequence, we're fast forwarding now to the late 1940s, early 1950s. Brother Rashid Ahmed of Milwaukee, he traveled to the Markaz in Rabwa, and Huzur gave him permission to shoot some videos with the camera technology that was available in those days. So then Brother Rashid Ahmed gave these films to the Jamaat, and today I have the opportunity to share them with you. However, again, because of the wireless connection between the podium here and the basement, that's why it's showing in terms of frames and not as a motion picture. As you can see, Hazrat Musleh Maud is laying the foundation stone from the buildings in Rabwa.
जब तुम ये तो बेटा सीधी बात है, मैंने पहले की सीखने पर मुझे 9 और मिसाल समझ आई। जब तुम किसी से मोहब्बत करते हो तो बताओ कभी भी तुम्हें किसी की ऐसी मोहब्बत हुई है कि तुम चाहो कि वो मुझसे मोहब्बत करे। ये मैंने की कोई बात है, कोई जगह में कभी नहीं ये सोच सकता कि मैं उससे मोहब्बत करूँ वो मुझसे ना करे। जब तुम किसी से मोहब्बत करोगे तुम्हारा दिल चाहेगा ये मुझसे करे। तो जब खुदा कहता है कि मैं फलाने से मोहब्बत करता हूँ तो इसके लाजमी बने हुए हैं कि खुदा कहता है वो मुझे करे। तो ये तो हो सकता है कि तुम चाहे और जब तुमसे मोहब्बत न करे, लेकिन ये तो कभी नहीं हो सकता कि खुदा चाहे और उसको मोहब्बत न करे। तो जब खुदा किसी मोहब्बत करेगा लाजमी दूसरे का दिल में उसको करेगा।
Now, just as a small disclaimer, I have hours of Jalsa Salana speeches of Hazrat Musleh Maud. So what I did is I superimposed the audio of his Jalsa Salana speeches on those scenes where Huzur is seen speaking. So that's just a disclaimer that the audio doesn't necessarily match the video, but it enables us to have some kind of a similar experience of being there in the audience in front of Huzur when he's delivering a speech. Now here Huzur is coming out of his residence, or where he was staying. That's Brother Rashid Ahmed in the back. And now Huzur is back at the Jalsa Gah delivering his address. Okay, now here I have something else special to share with the Jamaat. I want to give you a little bit of history of our Washington Jamaat, and especially for the younger generation, because I know most of us know who M.M. Ahmed Sahib is, and he is the grandson of the promised Messiah. His father, Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmed, was the brother of Hazrat Musleh Maud. So what he's explaining here is that when he was a young student, being the nephew of Hazrat Musleh Maud, he had the opportunity to live in the same house of Hazrat Ahmad Jan. And every year at Musleh Maud Day, we would have a very special opportunity to listen to Hazrat Mia M.M. Ahmed speak to us. So I did my best to convert one of the old VHS tapes so that I could share this with you today. It's kind of a low-tech solution which I prepared for today because my equipment wasn't fully working for a better conversion. However, I just want to share with you that for 10 minutes we can relive Hazrat Ahmed relating his personal experiences and stories and recollections from within the household of Hazrat Musleh.
I think he was sensing that something big is going to happen, and he was supplicating Allah to guide it and also to save humanity from any particular distressing situation. It was also his custom, now, that in any crisis, he started sleeping on the floor. He would leave his bed and would sleep on the floor until he was satisfied that the crisis is over. He had been assured by Allah that his prayers had been answered and he need not put himself to that type of strength. Actually, I remember that in one of his addresses he said he started sleeping on the floor and he had a vision that Allah gave him the form of his mother and tried to had a small stick in his hand and he said to him, look here, get up and go to your bed. Don't sleep on the floor, go step up and go back to your bed. Other things which I recollect is his very deep devotion to Quran. You have heard today Mr. Yahya's address of his service to Quran. He was really attached to it and he used to read it, and I remember seeing him reading the Quran by facing up and down, sometimes sitting, but very often facing up and down reading Quran. During the partition days, I seen him in the hall that whenever the caravan started from Qadian, he would get hold of the Quran and go on reading it until the Kafla came to the hall or was out of the masjid of the Indian who were attending various Kaflas his attachment to Quran was also reflected by regular dars which he used to give. The dars to be met usually after the Asr prayers, between Asr and Maghrib, and the dars to be given were given on Saturday mornings. This dars was given in the courtyard of Mustafa Latif. He used to stand in a veranda, and they used to women sitting on the floor in front of it throughout the courtyard. Sometimes he used to get very crowded, but he gave it very regularly whenever his head and his other duties permitted. He also gave a very long dars on for which he invited people from outside, and that lasted for about 1 month during the summer, and that was the basis of the Tafsir Kabir and the notes which were taken on that. I know some of the students who came to that dars from the hall and they attended it throughout the month of summer. Okay. He also, when I was married to his daughter, and we went to spend a few days with him in Jalsa, which was a hill station during the summer. He asked me, he said, he would like to give me some lessons in Quran, and he used to give those lessons. I was the only one who was there, and I used to take notes, and he would sit down and recite it to us, and then give his explanation and commentary, trying to explain everything in that particular verse. I would still have that book somewhere in my collections in I also remember speaking of his attachment to Quran, that he once came from the Maghrib prayer and we were there in the room of Mustafa Latif. It was is from diving into the heaven of the Quran and the beauty of the Quran. He said that if you dive into a sea, you are bound to come out either with precious pearl or at least a shell. So let me know whether you come out with a shell or with a pearl, but in any case, unless you dwell seriously on Quran, you can't really reach its beauties. And I remember very well the very serious way in which he talked to us that evening after coming out of the motorcade.
Okay, so that concludes all the multimedia presentation I had. I think most of the children were probably zoned out because it's quite a different experience to listen to someone over through a TV screen than the actual person sitting in front of you. So all these stories are very interesting and fascinating and really give us a truer experience and picture of what it was like to be close to Hazrat Musleh Maud and what were the things that were important to him and things like that. Inshallah, maybe in the future I'll have another opportunity to share more of this video with you and we can go through the stories again. But I think the last story that Hazrat Musleh Maud, that Hazrat Mia Ahmed Sahab, our former Amir, relayed is important for the children because Hazrat Musleh Maud came to the children of the household while Mia Ahmed Sahab was still young and living with them. And Hazrat Musleh Maud said to them, do you ever dwell on the Holy Quran? Children, do you understand? Guys, do I have your attention? Do you ever ponder over the Holy Quran? Because if you do, then you must come out with some gem, some diamond. Like diving into the sea, for those divers who dive to the bottom and search for pearls, or at least you will come back with a shell. So whenever you read the Holy Quran, you should ponder over it seriously, and you should at least come back with a shell, if not with a gem. So that was the last story that he conveyed. I want to repeat it because I know the limitations of the videos, and that concludes my presentation.
Jazakallah for that very enlightening trip down memory lane in Jamaat history. So before we begin the next program, if I could just ask all of the Atfal to move forward, please. The Atfal in the back, please move forward. And also I understand that we are going to replay the prophecy video again that was played earlier because we had some technical difficulties initially. And so we're just going to play that through, and then we will be doing a workshop on raising a righteous progeny, which will be led by Imam Al-Hassad. So first we'll play the video again. Is it ready? Is it ready to be played?
Okay. Oh, okay. Give me a minute.
Do this side. Okay.
मुस्लिम माऊद के ज़हूर के बारे में अजीमुशान इलाही बशारत। सो तुझे बशारत हो कि एक वजीही और पाक लड़का तुझे दिया जाएगा, एक ज़की गुलाम तुझे मिलेगा। वो लड़का तेरे ही तुख्म से तेरी ही ज़ुर्रियत व नस्ल होगा। खूबसूरत पाक लड़का तुम्हारा मेहमान आता है, उसका नाम अनवाइल और बशीर भी है। उसको मुक़द्दस रूह दी गई है और वो रिज्स से पाक है, वो नूरुल्लाह है। मुबारक वो जो आसमान से आता है, उसके साथ फजल है जो उसके आने के साथ आएगा। वो साहिब शको और अजमत और दौलत होगा। वो दुनिया में आएगा और अपने मसीही नफ्स और रूहुल हक की बरकत से बहुतों को बीमारियों से साफ करेगा। वो कलमतुल्लाह है, क्योंकि खुदा की रहमत व गयूरी ने उसे कलमा तमजीद से भेजा है। वो सख्त ज़हीन व फहीम होगा और दिल का हलीम और उलूम ज़ाहिरी व बातिनी से पुर किया जाएगा। और वो दीन को चाह करने वाला होगा। दो शम्बा है, मुबारक तो शम्बा, फर्जंद दिलबंद, गरामी अर्जुमंद, मजहरुल अव्वल वल आखिर, मजहरुल हक वल उलाए, काअन्नल्लाह नज़ला मिनस समाए, जिसका नज़ूल बहुत मुबारक और जलाल इलाही के ज़हूर का मूजिब होगा। नूर आता है नूर, जिसको खुदा ने अपनी रज़ामंदी के इत्र से ममसूह किया। हम उसमें अपनी रूह डालेंगे और खुदा का साया उसके सर पर होगा। वो जल्द जल्द बढ़ेगा और असीरों की रुस्तगारी का मूजिब होगा और जमीन के किनारों तक शोहरत पाएगा और कौमें उससे बरकत पाएंगी। तब अपने नफसी नुक्ताए आसमान की तरफ उठाया जाएगा। वकाना अमरम मक़ज़ियन।
So now we're going to begin our workshop on raising a righteous progeny. So for that, Imam Sahib, if you would please address us.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. National Review Department had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which you can see on the screens, to discuss how to raise a righteous progeny in the light of the life of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani, Hazrat Mustafa. This presentation has 21 slides, and I have 21 minutes. And it asks me to reflect on all the slides. So instead of following the slide of the slideshow exactly as is, let's start the conversation and let's see where it takes us. And I have the main ideas. It says 4 questions to ask ourselves. So I have those 4 questions in mind. So I'll bring them up as we go along. But let's start the conversation and let's see where we want to take the conversation. So I want in the beginning for both Atfal, okay, so I want both Atfal and the parents of the Atfal, young Qudam, and to participate. So the first question that we must be asking ourselves is, what are some of the issues which we have? What are some of the thoughts, what are some of the predicaments, or what are some of the worries we have about raising our progeny in the US, in the West, away from Rabbul State, away from the holy atmosphere that was there for Hazrat Mustafa for his progeny. So please jump in, raise your hand, I'll pick on you. What are some of the things that worries you about raising your child or raising children in this environment?
My biggest worry is the exposure to the freedom of exposure to the things that we don't expect them to be exposed to, which is different from being raised in, I guess, as in Pakistan, it's in Rabwa and Qadian.
So exposure to non-Islamic things,
yes,
and we don't know how to cocoon them, so to
yes,
speak, from them.
Materialistic life.
Materialistic life.
Tarbiyat.
Tarbiyat is a broad term. So we're talking about tarbiyat, but what specifically about tarbiyat? Like he said, exposure. When our children go to college, they're being exposed to things, even in high school, drugs, dating, all of these different things. So in tarbiyat, what's one specific thing that bothers us? So children or young Khuddam, what are some of the things?
I would say education with parents. Parents need to be educated.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that's most important.
The children having two personalities, one in the school and one is back in the homes.
Very good. Anyone else? So now the young Khuddam.
Children coming, growing within the Jamaat, saying, what's in it for me, rather than serving the Jamaat themselves.
Okay, so more of a self-serving kind of lifestyle. What's in it? Okay, I get it. So now I want our young Khuddam, high school kids, college students, what are some of their worries? No one? Okay, so I'll...
In case maybe we don't not be successful in life, or we don't make worry that we don't do a good job.
Good. Making it in life. Okay, so let me share a personal story, and then that will jog your memory, or that will jog your conscience to come up with things. So I had the good fortune or the bad fortune, however you want to put it, of not going to Jamia right after high school. So I decided I didn't want to go to Jamia, and I was Waqfi now. So I always had the back of my mind that Jamia is an option for me, but I instead went to university. And I went to UOI Urbana-Champaign, which is one of the Big Ten schools, and if you follow NCAA, they made it to Final Four in 2004, I think, and I went to college in 2006 and 2007. So in my first day of university, and this is literally my first day, so I'm there, and I have a freshman roommate, and right next to me I have two sophomores as roommates. And we're just sitting there talking, and those of you who have been to big colleges or big schools, there are a lot of fraternities, and they have a frat suite, where you can go to any frat, and you don't have to be a part of that frat. And fraternities, for those who don't know, are basically these small exclusive clubs, which on one hand have an agenda. For example, there can be engineering fraternity or education fraternity, Asian fraternity, but at the same time they're infamous for throwing these really huge parties. So the very first day, I'm sitting there with my freshman roommate, and these two big guys, I think they were sophomores or juniors, they come. They were already drunk. This is like 9 p.m. at night. And they go to me, what are you doing here? Like there are tons of parties happening outside. You have to go outside and join. And literally they made both me and my freshman roommate, he was Caucasian, they made us leave our room and go from frat to frat. This was my first night at a university. Is that something that bothers anyone? Is that something that similar experience that someone has had? So, but these are the things. So somebody mentioned exposure. So these are the things that we have to worry about. The 4 questions which are mentioned in here, or the 4 points about raising a righteous progeny, let me tell them to you before even going into them. They are prayer, 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 and prayer. All 4 of them are prayer. But I have had experiences where people have come up to me and say that whenever we approach a Rabbi Sahib or whenever we approach someone in Jamaat and we tell them I'm having this difficulty in my marital life, I'm having this difficulty with my children, the answer is always prayer. So this brings to light 2 problems that I think is there, and we need to discuss both of them. One problem is that Allah Ta'ala has said in the Holy Quran that prayers need to be accompanied by action. So on one hand, they're right, they do have a point. But the second point is even more important, which is the Jalsa talks about. That if we think prayer to be such a small thing, that when an answer is given that pray, our answer is, well, prayer is not the answer to everything. You should be giving me some counseling. Of course I should be giving you some counseling, but prayer is not a small matter to be ignored. And that is the first point. And I would like to discuss all of them in the end as well, the things that we talked about, exposure, materialism, and all of these different things. But let's go through this slide so I can do justice to my department as well. So prayers. The main problem that the Tabligh department has put aside, if we go on, next slide please, is that do we actually have the belief in God? If we actually had the strong belief in God that we're supposed to have as Ahmadis, then prayer would automatically be the first solution to all of our problems. But the fact that people are coming to us and saying that, well, prayer is not the answer to everything, you should be counseling people. On one hand, I understand the problem, and I want to discuss that as well. But on the other hand, it also points out towards an inherent problem within our thinking. That we have so far removed ourselves from the existence of God and from faith in God, that we don't even want to give prayers a try. And when someone talks about dua, when someone says that you should pray to Allah Ta'ala, we completely forget about that. Hazrat Musleh Maud, a story which is mentioned there is a very small story. That Hazrat Musleh Maud, when he was a young child, one of the companions of the promised Messiah decided that tonight I will go to Masjid Mubarak early, no one would be there, and I will spend the entire night prostrating in front of Allah, in tahajjud. So he says, I go to Masjid, and I find someone, a young man, in prostration, praying. And he was crying vehemently. And his cries were bothering me, that I could not even focus on my own prayer. So I stopped praying myself, and I said, Allah Ta'ala, whatever this kid is asking, give that to him. That's all I'm asking today. So I waited, I sat in the background waiting for this young man to finish his dua, his prayer. And then when a person got up from sajda, who else was Hazrat Musleh Maud? And then the Sahabi waited for Hazrat Musleh Maud to finish his prayer. And when he finished his prayer, he finally asked him, so Miya Sahab, what were you praying for today? So he thought Hazrat Musleh Maud must have asked for thousands of things today. And Hazrat Musleh Maud, in his shy demeanor, he looked down and said, I've only asked one thing from Allah Ta'ala today, that show me the victory of Islam in my own life. So we can take thousands of things from this one incident. But the fact that Hazrat Musleh Maud for such a strong belief in prayer is a main key that I want you to take away. Secondly, prayers before birth. How many of us have actually prayed for our children before they start smoking or before they start doing something bad? Yes, when something bad happens, we want to write thousands of letters to Hizbul Anwar. We want to come to Murabbi Sahib, we want to go to Jamaat and say, Khudamul Anbiya isn't doing something, they should have programs so my children can be fixed. But how many times have we prayed before the child is even born? Or before these problems occur? And the examples of the prophets are very clear. Examples of the prophets are, if you read the Holy Quran, there are thousands of examples of righteous progeny being born to prophets. Why? Because it prayed before him. Hazrat Zakaria alayhi salam, Hazrat Yahya alayhi salam, who was his son, was born because of his praying in seclusion for Hazrat Yahya. Hazrat Ismail and Hazrat Ishaq were both a result of prayers before the child was born. Hazrat Musleh Maud himself, 40 days in seclusion, 40 days. And if you read the stories of those 40 days, Hazrat Musleh Maud would not even see anyone. Food was given through a door. People used to peep through the doors and look at Hazrat Musleh Maud. That's how busy he was in praying. That's why Hazrat Musleh Maud was as he was. So prayers before something happens. Thirdly is prayers in solitude, which I've already mentioned, Chilla Kashi, or praying in seclusion. Then when no one's watching you. You know, life is really busy, and I understand that. But one of my dear colleagues, he's 4 years my senior, and I learned a lot from him in Jamia. He used to tell me that after every Isha Salah, you should have 5 minutes to talk to Allah. And Hazur said this in his previous Friday sermon as well. If you listen to the end of Hazur's sermon, Friday this one went by, Hazur said, compare your condition before and after the Salah. You went into the Salah, and then you finished the Salah. We all came here today, we're all going to leave. What would change? So we need those 5 minutes, those 10 minutes in solitude. When no one's there, when we don't have our iPhones in our hands, I'm not checking my Twitter feed, I'm not checking my Instagram page. I'm actually sitting there for 5 minutes, just pondering, and actually talking to Allah. There's nothing wrong with that. Sit there and speak to Allah. Allah Ta'ala is indeed a living God. And that's what we need to understand. That Allah Ta'ala is not something that we pray, Allah Ta'ala mujhe nek bacche de de, Allah Ta'ala mujhe nek bacche de de, Allah Ta'ala mujhe nek bacche de de, Assalamu alaikum. No, talk to Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala, I have these 50 shortcomings. For example, I get angry over you. I'm about to get married. Allah Ta'ala, talk to Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala, my nature is I get infuriated really quickly. I'm getting married. I think this is going to be a problem. And you consciously are talking to Allah in solitude. And these are the things which the prophets did, which Sahaba did. And they affected them, and that's why they had righteous progeny. And lastly, this presentation talks about prayers at night. And I have the quotations that I read them and I'll guide you to the slides at that time. That just one quotation or one example is the Great Revolution, which was brought about in the entire Arabia, was through the prayers of Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, if prayers in darkness can revolutionize an entire continent or subcontinent, so to speak, why can't our tahajjud, our nightly prayers, change the heart of one kid, one child? Why not? So these are the points that the presentation we're going to talk about. But let's get back to the main to the issues that we raised. I have 5 minutes, right? So if I may, I would like to pick on the brother who mentioned 2 personalities, because I think that sort of embodies everything, right? And I personally think, so I actually like your idea the best, and I have 5 minutes, so I would only like to talk about identity crisis that our children go through. And that is something I myself suffered through, that is something I know my colleagues have suffered through, and that is something I'm sure every kid who's sitting here, either right now or will suffer through, no matter what. This is something that's bound to happen. It ties in with every other thing that people mention. Materialism, exposure, all of these different things. How do we, so what I mean by identity crisis? What I mean is, there are children, we want our children to grow up in a very specific Jamaat system, Islamic system. And our children are growing up in that system. They come to mosque, I tell them all of these things. Then they go to school. And it's a completely different lifestyle, and they're being taught completely different things. That's one issue. Second issue, in front of me, most of us are immigrants, or most of us are not, most of us are different. Virginia is different in that sense that there is a lot of diversity. But some of our kids who grow up in places where they're the only, they're the outcast, so to speak. So they have the identity crisis of fitting in racially or ethnically or as well. And of course, different racial and ethnicities have their own culture that comes about. So there is identity crisis there. My understanding of this whole thing is, how do we solve this? And I suffered through this myself in high school. What helped me was was 2 things. Number 1, talking. My family had moved back to Pakistan, but my dad was still here. I did not talk to my dad, or my dad could not possibly would have understood what I was going through or connected it. It was impossible for him, and I understand that. But I had teachers. Literally every day after school, you can call me a nerd for that, you can call me whatever you want, but every day after school I sat down with my science teacher and my English teacher, and they were both bipolar, so to speak. They were completely poles apart. One of them was an atheist, who almost tried to convert me to atheism. And the other, my science teacher, she was Hindu by faith, but she was a very nice person who understood. And every day, I talked to them for an hour, hour and a half. And just talking to them after school, my problems, it wasn't just I'm suffering through this. It was just a much more wide conversation, much more vague conversation. But in that, my issues were being solved. I was being counseled. So my question is, if our children or high schoolers do not have the 2 teachers I had, the blessings of having, I had the blessings of, who is it that our children are talking to? So parents, at one stage or another, we need to realize that there is an issue. That our kids are definitely suffering through an identity crisis. And how can we help? And a lot of times, don't be ashamed, you might not be able to help. But just the fact that you're there to listen to them and talk to them, that will help your child. That's something that helped me. Not with my dad per se, but someone. Secondly, if the parents can't talk, do our children have someone else to talk to? And in that sense, I would like to volunteer myself and Rabbi Rizwan Sahib, without his permission right now, but to approach us. Right? Your Qaid Sahib Qadam al-Ahmadiyya, I know him really well, your Secretary Sahib Tabiyah. These guys are young, they have been through this. So if you're in high school, if you're a child, you have these dual concepts when you go to, or if you're a Nasrat, or if you're a girl going to college, you feel ashamed and you have to take off your hijab, and then you have to wear it out of embarrassment in the masjid. So either way, you take out embarrassment. There is something, you're going through a crisis. Let's solve that crisis. Second thing that helped me was being certain about my boundaries. So, for example, I go to high school. Islam says don't shake hands with the opposite gender as well. How many of you are doing this, right? Or can do this? But of course, Islam is not completely strict in that. So, without going into theology of things, but you need to make boundaries. So, for example, my boundary was no hugging, right? So I can shake hands, but no hugging. But it was such a strict boundary for me that no matter what happened, I'm not going to breach this boundary. And it is these boundary issues that we need to talk with our children. Then what are our boundaries, right? So it starts with, let's say, getting a funky haircut. That's fine. That might be you might allow your child to get that. But where does that stop? You need to draw straight lines, and your children need to be part of drawing those straight lines. And once those lines are drawn, I'm sure that will be resolved. So now, in conclusion, please ask me any questions. Ask me questions if you have, or something wrong, something that you disagree with or agree with. But to go back to the mid-side joke, we cannot underestimate the power of prayers. So if a Murabi Sahib or if a Sadr Jamaat or someone tells you prayer is the solution to your problem, he's right. The solution is definitely prayers. And of course there are all these other things you can do, but if prayers have become secondary in this whole process, then we think, well, we'll pray as well, but we need counseling right now. Then there's something wrong with the whole issue. We're not seeing the picture clearly. And that's what I had Muslim last time. So I'd like to finish my presentation off with just two quick quotations if I have time. The Hazur says, as a Muslim has mentioned, it is strange that our religious scholars make efforts regarding death of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, but do not try to bring God Almighty to life. They do not generate the spirit which instills insight and perception of Allah the Exalted. Our main effort should be to bring God to life and to inculcate greater connection with Him. If we have a living connection with God, then no matter how much noise is made by those who consider that Hazrat Isa is alive, our faith will not be corrupted because God will guide us every step of the way. So how many of us actually believe in a living God? Secondly, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasir Aziz, mentioned about prayers. Every member of the Jamaat also needs to self-reflect and reform practices. For this, the greatest weapon is prayer. And in this regard, we should keep in view that God states that one should develop one's faith and abide by the modus operandi that has been given to us. If practice and prayer and practice go hand in hand, we will be able to truly reform ourselves. So counseling, all of these things that we need to discuss the issues, those are valid questions or those are valid statements. But if they're not with prayers, if you're not supplementing them with prayers, then they would not work. Similarly, if the answer is always just pray and the counseling isn't there, that might not work as well. So we need to take these things hand in hand and have an open discussion at home. So I hope that once we go home, we can ask our children that what are some of the issues we are facing. Are you going through this identity crisis that Rabbi Sahib talked about? And maybe we can go from there. So may Allah Ta'ala enable us to do so.
Jazakallah Imam Sahib for a wonderful presentation of some very practical advice about some of the challenges that our youth are facing today. Now I'd like to call upon Mr. Hamid Khan Sahib for some personal reflections of Muslim. We're going to go to the chat.
My name is Hamid Ahmed Khan, and before that I must tell that I am not a speaker. I have never in my life delivered a speech. I'm just going to recall my memories from early childhood with Hazrat Muslim radiyallahu ta'ala. My earliest memory of him is 1944, and that came alive just a few days ago because my younger brother sent me a letter from Pakistan written by Hazur to me when I was 7 years old. And in that letter he was mentioning that I am responding to several of your letters which I received after returning to Qadian. He must have been out of Qadian. But that shows that he would not, just care about a child writing. I don't know what I was writing to him, but he responded. Can I look at my notes? Then, when partition of India took place, I was 10 years old, and Hazur decided to send Hazrat Ahmadiyya, the widow of Mustafa and certain members, women and children, to Pakistan before he would join. Actually, at that time, it was not very clear that Hazur would also move. I remember that we were given the impression that you are going to Lahore for a few days and you will come back. And we were not allowed to carry many things, and we were absolutely destitute when we reached Pakistan. Hazur finally joined after a couple of months, and Hazrat Ahmadiyya was already there, and both sisters. Among men, I remember Mirza Mansoor himself, the father of President Khalifatul Masih, that he was sent with them to take care of the children. And my father was not there. Most of the fathers were not there. When Hazur came, he took care of Jamaat and the family. And he also was under a lot of pressures. He had no money, very, very little money. It was from his kitchen that we were given food and clothing and everything. And my mother was very sick for some reason, and we had no money, no doctor. And I remember one day at night, I was still awake and my mother was sleeping. I saw someone come to the door. There was no door because of the partition. They had looted the doors, and I saw someone standing there. Then I recognized that it was Hazrat Muslim out. He was barefoot and he had no turban. He was just wearing shalwar and kameez. And he quietly stepped in and bent down. We were sleeping on the floor. Hazur used to sleep on the floor also. There were no beddings. And he bent down and he kissed my mother's forehead, and then he put his hand under her pillow, and then he sat there for a little while. It was dark, but I could see that he sat, and then he walked away. When he walked away, then I woke up my mother, and I told her that Hazur had just come. Now, the relationship between my mother and Hazur is that my mother is her niece. She was daughter of Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmad. So someone might think that he just barged in and kissed a lady on his forehead, but she was her niece, just like a daughter. So my mother looked under the pillow and there was a 100 rupees note, which at that time was a great thing. We didn't even have a 1 rupee with us. And the food that we used to get was so meager that sometimes it was short, and we would just carry the big pot to the tap and open it and fill it with more water to make it more soup. So to have 100 rupees at that time was a great help. What I mean to say is that he, despite all the pressures, he had time to reflect that in another part of the building, which was quite far away, that my mother was sick and her husband was not there. He came here, and many other things like this. Eid came and he got me a trouser for the Eid because we had no clothes. And he refused to sleep on the bed because Jamaat arranged a bed for him, and he said to the people in Qadian are still there and the others who are here, they don't have bed, I'm not going to sleep on the bed. He used to sleep on the floor. And then the doctors decided that Hazur is under so much pressure that he might have a nervous breakdown because of the meager means and the Jamaat's pressures. So it was advised to Hazur that you should be detached from the daily work of Jamaat for some time. Otherwise, medically, it is very impossible for some person to go through these pressures. Hazur completely refused that, no, I cannot do that. Jamaat is nothing without me and I am nothing without Jamaat. But then it was prevailed upon him that he should go to Quetta for some time. Hazur was taking care of us, the kids and the women and the children, in a way that at least I thought that I am like his son. His own son, Mirza Rafiq Ahmad Marhum, he was of my age. I never thought that he was something special, and neither Hazur treated his own children in a special way. And when they were going to go to Quetta on Lahore station, Jamaat was there to send him off, and it was a second class bogie, and he was sitting in the window with my grandmother. My grandmother was his younger sister and was a widow. And we were playing on the platform, and Mirza Rafiq Ahmad Sahib, who was of my age, he was also there. When the train was about to move, they asked Mirza Rafiq Ahmad to come in to join the family because obviously he was moving with his own immediate family. Then I realized that why is Mirza Rafiq Ahmad going and not I am going, not thinking that he is his son and he has to go with him. And I threw a tantrum, started crying that why is he going? It was children's jealousy. Hazur turned to my grandmother and they asked her that why is this child Hamid crying like that? And she told him that he's just being silly. He didn't tell any reason. And when the train started moving, and now I was sure that Rafiq is going and I'm left behind, I threw myself on the platform and started crying more. And then again he asked my grandmother that no, something more serious has happened. He is very agitated. Then my grandmother told him that he does not understand that Rafiq is your son and he is going with you as a family and he cannot go. So that is why he is very upset. Now, Hazur was taking my grandmother because my grandmother was his sister and also a widow. He had another sister who was not a widow. He did not take her with him. So he took those who were without any male family member. The train left, it used to take 3 days to reach Quetta. After about 10 or 12 days, there was a knock on our door, and my mother opened the door, and it was Dr. Abdul Hamid Saab. He was the chief medical officer of Pakistan Railway. And he said, Hazur has sent me from Quetta. Prepare some little suitcase for Hamid because he has asked me to bring him over. In spite of all those worries, he did not forget my agitation. And Hazur went in second class. Dr. Abdul Hamid Sahib had a grand salon given to him by railway because he was the chief medical officer. It had a servant quarters and kitchen and dining room. I enjoyed that triple R. 3 days to Quetta. when we reached Quetta, Dr. Saab took me to Hazur. Hazur was staying in a place called York House. It has small cottages. If someone have been to Hawaii, there is a Hilton village and they have small cottages. It was made in that way. I think there are about 12 or 16 cottages. And each small family, Hazur's 4 wives and sister and Hazrat Ammajan, given different cottages. So Hazur was sitting in his office and I was standing here, and then Hazur said that I am a little busy and I will attend to you in a few minutes. Just in a couple of minutes he said, let me know where you want to stay. You have a choice to stay with your grandmother or with the Hazrat Ammajan. I was not at all frank or free with Hazrat Ammajan because of the age difference and her status as widow of Hazrat Masih Maud. And my grandmother had actually raised me. I was very close to her, and I should have told him that I would go and stay with my grandmother. But I don't know why I said I would stay with Hazrat Ammajan. So he took my hand and he walked to Hazrat Ammajan's cottage and he said, Ammajan, this is my guest, but he will stay with you. And Ammajan showed me a couch that here you will sleep, and next to it was her room. And then she said, you must be very eager to play with your friends, your cousins. You go and play, but before Maghrib you come back. I went out and I very proudly showed to Rafiq that I have also come. And now in those 2 years that we have come from Qadian, I had not tasted any fruit, none of us, because that was a luxury. In Quetta there is a lot of fruits. And Jamaat had brought fruits as gifts for Hazrat Sahib and his family. And when I saw so much fruit, I started eating it and eating it and eating it. I would not stop. At the end of the day, when I came to sleep, it upset my stomach, and in a very bad way. And I had a flatulence. I was very thin in my young age, and anybody could see that it's a huge tummy full of air and a very small body attached to it. At about 1 o'clock at night, I had so much pain that I started crying. Hazrat Ammajan woke up and she came and she could immediately tell what had happened to me. And she had a female lady who used to take care of her. She woke her up and she said, जाओ मियाँ महमूद को बताओ कि उनका मेहमान बीमार हो गया है. Go and tell Mian Mahmood that your guest is very sick. After a few minutes, I saw him coming with a lantern in his hand because it was dark in between. And he came there, no pagdi and just slippers. And there was a muda, I don't know how you, stool? Yeah, there was a stool beside my bed and he sat on it and he looked at me and he immediately, he didn't have to ask me what was wrong. So he told me that I will come back with some medicine. So he went back again to his cottage, which was quite a distance, and comes back with some homeopathic medicine. And he put it in my mouth and he sat there. While he was there, I passed air. And the relief came so quick that I think that I slept while he was still there. I don't remember when he got up and went back. It's such a personal attendance. He could have just sent a servant, or Dr. Mirza Munawwar Ahmad Sahib was there. He could have asked him that go and take care of him. But he personally came to a young child and took care of me. So that has a very lasting impression on me, that why should he call me from Lahore and to Quetta and then take care of me like that. And then the other event which was very special for me was that in our family, in those days there were only 3 families, and all the marriages used to take place among the family members. They were Hazrat Ahmadiyya's family, who were Sayyids, from my grandfather's Pathans, and Hazur's family, the Mughals. So all the marriages were taking place within these 3 groups. And Hazur's intention was that everybody should get married quickly and start having children, so that the population of families increase. At that time it was a great subject. But somehow I was not agreeing to marry in the family. Not that I had anything against the family, but to me all my cousins, they just looked like my sister to me. And I told my auntie, my father's younger sister, that this is the reason I'm not agreeing to all the suggestions. She said that I have a friend who has just converted to Ahmadiyya, and she is a very nice girl, but although she is older than you, so if you agree to marry her. I was at that time 18 or 19-year-old. So she showed me her picture, and I liked the picture, and then on that same Jalsa, it was 1956 Jalsa Salana, that girl came with her to attend the Jalsa. And Hazrat Mirza Bashiram Sahib also met her, and I saw her, and I said that, yes, and I told my father I want to marry this girl. My father was not disagreeing, but he was very nervous how to go about it. It's such a very difficult thing to do that. And I kept insisting, and he would say no. Now I had no choice. Hazrat Sahib was very approachable, very accessible. I mean, a person with so much grace, and as I was asking me how should I translate Quwwat-e-Qudsiya, there was an aura around him that you were scared to talk something like bluntly. But I went to him, and he was sitting on the floor, and there were a pile of letters that he was responding. And he looked at me and he said, "What is it? Kya baat hai?" And I knew that I could not waste his time, and so immediately I said, "Hazur, I want to get married." He says, "Then talk to your father." I said, "My father is not favorably responding to me." And he asked me the reason, and I told him that the family structure is like that. And he said, "There's no reason." So he called one of his wives, I don't know if it was Mariam Sadiqa or Merapa, that fetched his father. And his security guard was sent, and he brought my father. My father was very nervous, and when he saw me there, he thought that maybe I had done something wrong, and now he is going to be reprimanded. And Hazur said that your son has asked you to get him married, and you are not agreeing to it. And my father gave him the same reason. He said, "No, that's not the reason." He said, "Haven't you heard the hadith?" He was a Shari person. He would not say, "Musleh ye hai, Musleh wo hai." Whatever was according to the Sunnah and the Quran, he will do it, and he will not care about anything else. And he was not scared of any opinion if it stood against these two things. So he said, Hazur has said that if your awlad baligh ho jaye, when they are grown up and they demand that they should be married, and if parents they do not agree, then any error or mistake done by that child is not his sin. It is the sin of the parents. And then he turned towards me. He said, where are your in-laws? He did not yet ask me who is the girl or what. His main concern was that he is baligh. He is asking for a wedding and that should take place. And he said, where is your in-laws? I said, they are in Lalpur. No, this is in Rampur. He said, go fetch them, because I will perform your nikah before Maghrib. Then everybody got nervous that this is going to take place. So they called Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Sahib, because for some reason he was always had some special attitude towards Hazrat Mirza Nasir. So you could feel it. He has other sons. But with him he spoke with much more respect. So Hazrat Mirza Nasir Sahib called him and he said, Hazur, there is a decision by the Shura that the Khalifatul Masih will not marry, will perform nikah of the girl whose family is non-Ahmadi, because if some dispute arises afterwards and the case goes to the court, then the court can ask for the nikah khwan, and you will have to appear in the court, and that Shura does not allow that. Now he could say that I can overrule Shura, but he did not do that. He said, okay, then call Shamas Sahib, Maljad Shamas Sahib. He will perform the nikah and I will do the dua. And the same day he got me married. So now I see that nikah form is a huge thing. You know, ladki is in Canada, the ladka is in Pakistan, the parents are here, or they have a nikah form in the farm, and they are going from the ladki's parents to boy, and the parents will invent that the missionary there, missionary there, missionary there, Amir Jamaat there. My cousin has that experience in Mirza Mahmood Ahmad Sahib. I think he spent thousands of dollars to fill that nikah form. So it was such a simple thing. And I do not know why unless there is a dholki, there is a ronak, there is a mehndi, there is this, there is mithai, yevo. Other things are, main nikah is not so important as, all these customs. And then after that, then he, not me, asked us, where is he getting married? And they told him that he is Chaudhry Khushi Muhammad's daughter. He said, yes, I stayed with him when I went to Kashmir. And he was very kind to my wife for as long as he lived after that. And especially, that would show that she may not think that I am from outer the family and I am rejected. Even when he was very sick, he used to turn towards her and would say, Kashmir ki beti aa gayi hai, because she was from Kashmir. So these are the memories. And yes, then in Pakistan, the barber is not a barber shop, especially in the villages. The barber used to be who also performed circumcisions, and he was called surgeon. Usko, कहते थे जरा. So he used to perform minor surgery and circumcision and all that. So Muhammadin Nai, the barber, he used to come to every Friday to cut the nails of Hazur. And Hazur suffered from gout. And Hazur was nazuk. He was not hardy. He was very sensitive. And the gout is very painful. Anyone who has it, he will know I have it, and it's extremely painful. Even if the paper touches you, you cry out. So he was sitting like this, and Muhammadin came and sat down and took out his tools, which you could see that he had cleaned them very thoroughly. That shows the love that people had for him. I always remember him as a beloved. His workers around him, Jamaat and servants and his wives, he was a beloved. And he was a beloved of God also. There are many occasions which I remember that God heard his wish. Prayer is a very big thing, even his wish. So Muhammadin took his knife, and when he held his toe, and he had not yet touched the nail, that Hazur felt pain, and he said, "Oof, Muhammadin." And he left everything and stood up. And he said, "Hazur, the knife I am not putting on your nail, I am putting it on my heart. So I can be as careful as possible that you should not feel pain." So I still remember that expression of love and care which people had for him. And then of course he got it. And I think it will go on too many things. This is more than enough, which shows his care for the children, for the family, and also that what is right should be done, not ये रस्म रिवाज जो हैं कि ये तो हमारे खानदान में नहीं है, ये हमारे बाहर से है, these things, he had no consideration.
Jazakallah Hamid Sahib for those wonderful recollections of Hazrat Musleh Maud, very, very inspiring. And I hope somehow you're recording those recollections either by writing or by film or somehow, because that's the Jamaat history that we need to compile for the next generation. Those are wonderful insights. So at this point we are now approaching the end of our program. If I could call upon the Northern Virginia President, Sadr Sahib, Dr. Nadeem Khan Sahib, to provide some concluding remarks. And then that'll be followed by collective dua, and then Zuhr prayer. All right.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'm just going to conclude the meeting by announcing that we will do the silent prayers, namaz-e-zohar, and then we will have the lunch. At the same time, I would like to thank all the speakers, especially Imam Rizwan Khan Sahib, Imam Talha Sahib, and of course Hamid Khan Sahib. I also humbly request all the Jamaat members to remember all the volunteers, the team of volunteers who made this Jalsa happen, the Ziyafat team working outside hours before we came, the lead of this Jalsa, Kalim Ahmed Sahib, in the Ziyafat team, Farhan Mirza Sahib, Tahir Chaudhry Sahib, Munir Khan Sahib, and all of the lots of other volunteers. Please keep them in your prayers and forego any of their shortcomings. Our next regional function would be next month, inshallah, on May 17th. It's Jalsa Khilafat Day. So that would be on May 17th. It's a Sunday, and we'll start inshallah same time at 11 o'clock. I also want to get this opportunity to let everybody know that with the grace of God, we have launched the Mubarak Mosque Tahir Academy. It's already in function, and we already had its first session last Sunday. Kaleem Ahmed Sahib is the principal of the academy, and I want to introduce him, and I want him to come up on the podium and quickly give a brief introduction about the Tahir Academy for a minute or so.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'll make it very short. It's just a humble reminder that, Alhamdulillah, as Sadr has mentioned, we have launched Tahir Academy. April 5th was the launch date. So basically the classes starts at 10:30, inshallah, every Sunday. Unless it is announced specifically that there might be an overriding Jamaat function. But 10:30 is when the classes starts, and the classes comprise of Holy Quran, Urdu, and religious general knowledge. So I would request our parents who has sons and daughters in the age group between 5 and 15 to have your kids registered for the class. Their registration form, not on this table, probably perhaps outside. If not, please talk to any of the Sadran or myself, or if it is the Lajna upstairs, please feel free to talk to your Lajna Sadr as well, who can get you on the registration form and details. Anyway, please do take advantage of the class. There's a lot of planning that went into this class, and it's a national directive based on a Shura proposal that was sent to Azur, and Azur approved. And inshallah, it will be a great class going forward. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah. Kaleem sir. So with that, we come to the conclusion of this. We will have about 5 minutes break for wuzu. This will be followed by the Zohar prayers, and then we'll have the lunch. Men will eat outside, and the ladies would have their lunch in the basement. At this point, I ask Imam Rizwan Khan Sahib, please lead us to the silent prayers, and we conclude this meeting. Jazakallah.
Please join in silent prayer. Ameen.